"You won't believe what happened yesterday at the Ravencrest mansion," whispered Scarlett Montgomery to her best friend 3 months later, her eyes sparkling like stars as she adjusted her wedding veil in the mirror. "But that's a story for later. Let me tell you how it all started with that cursed ad." 3 months earlier, Scarlett was staring at the pile of overdue bills scattered across the kitchen table as if they were personal enemies. The tiny apartment smelled of reheated coffee and desperation, while from the next room came the familiar and nauseating sound of bottles crashing against the wall. "Scarlett, where's my money?" Harold Montgomery's slurred voice cut through the air like a rusty blade. She closed her eyes and counted to 10, then to 20. At 25, she gave up and yelled back, "There's no money, Dad! You drank it all!" The sound of something heavy falling to the floor made her shudder. Scarlett was 24 years old and felt like she was 80. Her chestnut hair was always pulled back in a messy bun, not by choice, but because she had neither the time nor energy for anything else. Her green eyes, once described as oceanic by an optimistic boyfriend, now looked more like muddy puddles after a storm. That's when she saw the crumpled newspaper on the floor, probably left by some neighbor. A headline made her frown. "Ravencrest family offers astronomical salary for housekeeper. No one lasts more than a week." "Interesting," she murmured, picking up the paper and reading the article. The eccentric family living in Millbrook's most haunted mansion is offering $15,000 a month to anyone who can stay as housekeeper for at least 6 months. The problem? No one has ever made it past the first week. $15,000. Scarlett read it again, making sure she wasn't dreaming. It was more money than she saw in 6 months working as a cleaner at 3 different jobs. "Scarlett, get over here now!" Harold bellowed again, this time with a dangerous tone she knew all too well. Without thinking twice, Scarlett tore the ad from the newspaper, grabbed her worn purse and walked out the door, leaving behind the apartment that felt more like a prison and a father who had long since stopped being her hero. The Careers and Destinies employment agency was located in downtown Millbrook, squeezed between a candy shop and a funeral home, an irony that didn't escape Scarlett as she observed the facade. "So you're interested in the position at Ravencrest Mansion?" asked Beatrice Sullivan, the attendant, with an expression that mixed surprise and concern. She was a plump woman in her 50s, with thick-rimmed glasses and a maternal air that immediately made Scarlett feel at home. "I am." "When can I start?" Beatrice coughed uncomfortably. "Honey, did you read the ad correctly? Because I need to be honest with you. We've sent 47 candidates there in the last 2 years. 47, and they all ran away before the end of the first week." "Why?" "Well," Beatrice lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Some say the mansion is haunted. Others talk about the owner being a complete lunatic. Some people swear they've seen strange things through the windows. And one of the girls said he didn't even show up to meet her, just left a list of absurd rules taped to the kitchen door." Scarlett thought about her drunk father at home, the overdue bills, and the constant feeling of sinking in quicksand. "I'll take it." "But you haven't heard everything yet," Beatrice protested. "There's more. They say he's young, rich, and handsome, but completely antisocial. Lives alone in that giant mansion and only leaves the house at night. If that's not suspicious, I don't know what is." "Sounds like a vampire," Scarlett laughed. And it was the first time she had genuinely laughed in months. But rich vampires pay well, apparently. Beatrice stared at her for a few seconds, then sighed deeply. "Are you sure, honey? Because once I call there and confirm, I can't cancel anymore. They're very specific about these things." Scarlett looked through the agency's dirty window. Outside life continued its normal pace, people walking hurriedly, cars passing by, the world spinning. And there she was, at 24, without prospects, without money, without hope. "I'm absolutely sure." "All right then." Beatrice picked up the phone with the expression of someone about to feed a hungry lioness. "Hello, Mr. Ravencrest? We have a new candidate. Yes, she accepts all conditions. Tomorrow at 9? Perfect." She hung up and looked at Scarlett with a mixture of admiration and pity. "You start tomorrow at 9 in the morning. The mansion is on Oak Street, number 1313. It's impossible to miss. It's the only house on the street that looks like it came out of a horror movie. Thank you, Beatrice. Honey, the woman called when Scarlett was almost at the door. Good luck. And if things get too weird, you can always come back here. We have other positions, you know. Less dangerous ones. Scarlett waved and left, feeling for the first time in years that maybe, just maybe, her life was about to change for the better. Of course, she had no idea how much. That night, Scarlett packed her bags, which consisted of 2 grocery bags with her clothes, and left a note for her father. Got a job. I'll be back when I can save enough money for us to move out of here. She didn't mention that coming back wasn't necessarily in her plans. As she lay down on the couch for the last time, the bedroom was exclusive territory for her father and his bottles. Scarlett looked at the stained ceiling and made a promise to herself. Regardless of what awaited her at Ravencrest Mansion, she would endure it, because anything was better than that life. Anything. Even an antisocial vampire boss with eccentric tendencies in a possibly haunted mansion. What could go wrong? She whispered to the ceiling, and for the first time in months she fell asleep smiling. If she had known that across town, in a majestic and haunted mansion, a young man with dark eyes was looking out the window thinking exactly the same thing, maybe she would have slept even better. Or maybe she wouldn't have been able to close her eyes at all. If Scarlett thought her life was a horror movie before, she realized she'd been living in a romantic comedy compared to what awaited her at 1313 Oak Street. The mansion loomed before her like a Gothic cathedral designed by someone with serious commitment issues. 3 stories of dark stone, gargoyles that seemed to follow her with their eyes, and windows so black they looked like they were absorbing light instead of reflecting it. The iron gate creaked in protest as she pushed it open, as if warning her to turn back while she still could. Well, this is definitely not the suburban dream house, she muttered, adjusting her grip on her grocery bag luggage. But hey, at least it has character. The front door was massive, easily 12 feet tall with intricate carvings that depicted scenes she really didn't want to analyze too closely in broad daylight. Before she could even knock, the door swung open with a dramatic groan that would make any horror movie director weep with joy. Miss Montgomery, I presume? The voice belonged to a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a Victorian photograph. Tall, skeletal, thin, with silver hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her features, and dressed entirely in black. I am Mrs. Grimsby, the estate manager. That's me, Scarlett replied with forced cheerfulness. Ready to start making this place sparkle. Mrs. Grimsby's expression suggested that sparkle was possibly the most offensive word she'd ever heard. The master has left specific instructions. You are to familiarize yourself with the estate today. Your duties begin at dawn tomorrow. You are not to enter the East Wing under any circumstances. You are not to disturb the master between sunset and sunrise, and under no condition are you to touch anything in the library on the 2nd floor. Scarlett nodded, trying not to laugh. Got it. East Wing bad, library hands off, master is basically a vampire. Anything else? If Mrs. Grimsby found her humor amusing, she hid it better than state secrets. Your quarters are in the West Wing, 3rd door on the left. Dinner is served at 6 sharp in the servants' hall. Do not be late. She paused, studying Scarlett with the intensity of a scientist examining a particularly interesting bacteria. May I ask why you think you'll succeed where 47 others have failed? Scarlett considered the question seriously. Honestly, I'm too desperate to quit and too stubborn to die. Plus, I've been dealing with an unpredictable, moody man who makes strange noises at night for years. At least this one pays well. For the first time, something that might have been amusement flickered in Mrs. Grimsby's eyes. Indeed. Follow me. The mansion's interior was a masterpiece of organized chaos. Crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings, casting rainbow patterns on walls lined with portraits of stern-looking ancestors who seemed personally offended by Scarlett's presence. Persian rugs covered marble floors so polished she could see her reflection, and every surface was adorned with artifacts that probably belonged in museums. The master appreciates ambiance, Mrs. Grimsby explained, noticing Scarlett's wide-eyed stare. He's quite particular about maintaining the estate's historical integrity. Historical integrity or dramatic flair? Scarlett asked, pausing in front of a suit of armor that was definitely giving her attitude. Both, I suspect. They climbed a grand staircase that could have hosted a royal wedding, past more portraits and several marble statues that seemed positioned specifically to startle unsuspecting housekeepers. Finally, Mrs. Grimsby stopped at a door that looked refreshingly normal. Your room. The master requests that you make a list of everything that needs attention. He'll review it tomorrow evening. Scarlett pushed open the door and gasped. The room was larger than her entire apartment, with a 4-poster bed, a fireplace, and windows that overlooked gardens that belonged in fairy tales. It was like stepping into a princess fantasy, if princesses lived in slightly ominous castles. This is incredible, she breathed. The master believes in treating staff well, Mrs. Grimsby said simply. Those who stay, that is. After the estate manager left, Scarlett sat on the bed and bounced experimentally. It was like sitting on a cloud made of marshmallows and dreams. For the first time in years, she felt something dangerous blooming in her chest. Hope. She spent the rest of the day exploring, carefully avoiding the forbidden East Wing, and making her list. The mansion was immaculate, but felt oddly empty, like a beautiful theater between performances. Every room told a story, but they all seemed to be missing their main character. As evening approached, Scarlett found herself increasingly curious about the mysterious master. What kind of man lived alone in a palace but hired housekeepers he never met? What was in the East Wing that was so secret? And why did every portrait in the house feature people with the same piercing dark eyes? At exactly 6 p.m., she made her way to the servants' hall, where Mrs. Grimsby was waiting with a dinner that looked like it came from a 5-star restaurant. Does the master always eat alone? Scarlett asked, taking a bite of what might have been the best roast chicken of her life. Always. Doesn't he get lonely? Mrs. Grimsby paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. I believe, Miss Montgomery, that loneliness is precisely what he's trying to avoid. That night, Scarlett lay in her impossibly comfortable bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the house settle around her. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the faint sound of piano music, hauntingly beautiful and achingly sad. She smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow she would finally meet the mysterious master of Ravencrest Mansion. She had no idea that 3 floors below, a young man with dark eyes was staring out his window, wondering if this new housekeeper would be different from all the others. And for the first time in years, both of them fell asleep to the same melody, played by invisible fingers on the keys of possibility. Scarlett woke at dawn feeling more rested than she had in months, which was ironic considering she was sleeping in a potentially haunted mansion. The morning light streaming through her windows revealed gardens that looked like they'd been painted by angels with serious artistic talent. She dressed quickly in her best professional housekeeper outfit, which admittedly wasn't saying much, and headed downstairs with her carefully prepared list. Mrs. Grimsby was already in the kitchen, moving around with the efficiency of a woman who could probably run a small country in her spare time. Good morning, Miss Montgomery. The master will see you in his study at precisely 8 a.m. Do not be late. Where's his study? 2nd floor, end of the hall. The door with the dragon knocker. Of course it has a dragon knocker, Scarlett muttered, pouring herself coffee from a pot that was somehow already perfect temperature. Because regular door knockers are for peasants. At exactly 8 a.m., Scarlett stood before the dragon door, her heart doing gymnastics routines she didn't know it was capable of. She lifted the heavy bronze knocker and let it fall twice. Enter. The voice was deep, cultured, and had the kind of richness that made her think of dark chocolate and expensive whiskey. Scarlett took a breath, turned the handle, and stepped into what she assumed would be her first and last meeting with the mysterious master of Ravencrest Mansion. The study was a book lover's fever dream, floor-to-ceiling shelves, leather-bound volumes, and the kind of rolling ladder that screamed, "I'm too sophisticated for regular furniture." Behind an enormous mahogany desk sat a man who made Scarlett's brain temporarily forget how to form words. He was probably in his early 30s with dark hair that looked like he'd been running his fingers through it. and those same piercing dark eyes from all the portraits. But where the painted ancestors looked stern and judgmental, his eyes held something else entirely, a kind of weary sadness that made her want to make him soup and ask about his feelings. "You're not what I expected," he said, standing and extending his hand. "I'm Nathaniel Ravencrest." Scarlet shook his hand, trying not to notice how it was both strong and surprisingly warm for someone who allegedly had vampiric tendencies. "Scarlet Montgomery. And what exactly were you expecting?" A ghost of a smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Someone who would take one look at me and run screaming. They usually do. Well, I've seen my father at 3 a.m. trying to make pancakes while drunk, so my threshold for scary is pretty high." This time he actually smiled, and it was like watching the sun come out after a thunderstorm. "Mrs. Grimsby mentioned you had an unusual perspective on things. She mentioned you're basically a vampire who never leaves his lair." "Ah." The smile faded slightly. "And yet here you are. Here I am." Scarlet held up her list. "Ready to make this place even more magnificently dramatic than it already is." Nathaniel gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Please sit. Tell me about yourself, Miss Montgomery. What brings a young woman to accept a position that has, historically, been challenging to fill?" Scarlet settled into the chair, which was probably worth more than her father's entire collection of empty bottles. "Honestly, desperation mixed with stubbornness and a healthy dose of literally anything is better than my current situation. That's refreshingly honest. I figure if I'm going to work for someone, they should know what they're getting. I'm broke, I'm running from a bad home situation, and I have absolutely nothing to lose. Which means I'm probably the most dangerous kind of employee you could hire." "Dangerous how?" "I'm not easily intimidated, I ask too many questions, and I have a tendency to reorganize things according to logic rather than tradition." She paused. "Also, I talk too much when I'm nervous, which I am right now, obviously." Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, studying her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Why are you nervous?" Scarlet blinked. "Because well, look at you. You're like something out of a gothic romance novel. Mysterious, handsome, living in a castle, playing piano at midnight. You heard the piano? Hard to miss. You're really good, by the way, though your song choices lean toward the dramatically melancholy." Something shifted in his expression, surprise maybe, or something deeper. No one's ever mentioned the music before. Maybe no one else was listening. They stared at each other for a moment, and Scarlet felt something electric pass between them, a recognition maybe, or the first stirring of something that could become dangerous if she wasn't careful. Nathaniel cleared his throat and reached for her list. "Let's see what needs attention." As he read, Scarlet studied his face. There were shadows under his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights, and a tension in his shoulders that suggested he carried weight heavier than just running a large estate. When he smiled, which he'd done more in the past 10 minutes than probably all month, his whole face transformed. "This is very thorough," he said finally, "and surprisingly insightful. Most people focus on the obvious things, dusting, polishing, arranging flowers. You've identified structural issues, efficiency problems, and..." He paused, looking up at her. "You want to restore the conservatory? It's beautiful, but it's dying. All those plants need someone to care about them." She shrugged. "I guess I have a thing for lost causes." "Is that what I am? A lost cause?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with more meaning than a simple employer-employee conversation should carry. "I don't know yet," Scarlet said softly. "But I'd like to find out." Nathaniel stood abruptly, walking to the window that overlooked the gardens. "Miss Montgomery, I should warn you. This house, this position, me, we're not easy. There are reasons why others have left. There are reasons why I stayed." He turned back to her, and for just a moment she saw past the carefully constructed walls to something vulnerable underneath. "Very well. We'll try this arrangement. But I have conditions. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. My schedule is unconventional. I work mostly at night, sleep during the day. The East Wing remains off limits, and he hesitated. I'm not good with people, Miss Montgomery. I haven't been for a long time. Scarlett stood and walked to where he stood by the window. Lucky for you, I'm excellent with difficult people. I've had lots of practice. When she smiled at him, Nathaniel felt something he'd forgotten existed. Hope. Welcome to Ravencrest Mansion, Miss Montgomery. Thank you, Mr. Ravencrest. I think this is going to be interesting. Neither of them knew just how interesting it would become. 3 weeks into her employment at Ravencrest Mansion, Scarlett had established what she generously called a routine, and what Mrs. Grimsby more accurately described as controlled chaos with excellent results. The mansion had never looked better. Scarlett attacked dust bunnies like they'd personally insulted her mother, restored the conservatory to its former glory, and somehow managed to reorganize the library without violating Nathaniel's strict "don't touch anything" rule. She'd done this by the simple expedient of asking him directly, which apparently was such a novel approach that he'd been too surprised to say no. What she hadn't expected was how quickly she'd become attuned to Nathaniel's schedule. She knew when he was in his study, soft classical music, when he was restless, pacing footsteps above her room, and when he was composing, hauntingly beautiful melodies that made her heart ache in ways she didn't understand. Tonight was a composing night. Scarlett lay in bed listening to the piano music drift through the mansion like a ghost made of sound. The melody was different tonight. Less melancholy. More hopeful. She found herself getting up and padding barefoot through the halls, following the music like a compass needle follows north. She'd never ventured into the main part of the house this late, but something about the music drew her forward. The melody led her down the grand staircase, through the portrait gallery where painted eyes seemed to watch her passage, and finally to a door she'd never noticed before, partially hidden behind a velvet curtain. The music was coming from beyond that door. Scarlett knew she should turn around. She knew she was violating the unspoken boundaries of their arrangement, but the melody was so beautiful, so full of longing, that she found herself pushing the door open just a crack. The room beyond was breathtaking. It was a music room straight out of a fairy tale, with a massive grand piano at its center, surrounded by instruments from around the world. Moonlight streamed through tall windows, casting silver patterns across the floor. And at the piano, completely absorbed in his music, sat Nathaniel. He'd removed his jacket and tie, and his white shirt was open at the collar. His dark hair fell across his forehead as he played, and his entire being seemed focused on coaxing beauty from the keys. This wasn't the carefully controlled man she'd met in his study. This was someone lost in pure emotion, translating feelings into music. Scarlett meant to leave. She really did. But then Nathaniel hit a wrong note and swore softly, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "The transition to the bridge," she said softly, stepping into the room. "You're fighting it instead of flowing into it." Nathaniel spun around, his eyes wide with surprise. "Scarlett, you shouldn't. I know, I'm sorry. I heard the music and—" She gestured helplessly. It was too beautiful to ignore. He stared at her for a long moment, taking in her bare feet, her hair loose around her shoulders the way the moonlight made her look ethereal. "You understand music? My mother was a pianist. Before she died, she taught me to listen, really listen, to what music is trying to say." Scarlett moved closer to the piano, running her fingers along its polished edge. "This piece, it's about longing, isn't it? About wanting something you think you can't have." Nathaniel's breath caught. "How did you—" "Because I recognized the feeling." She looked up at him and something passed between them that had nothing to do with employer and employee relationships. "Would you play it again? From the beginning?" He nodded slowly, his fingers finding the keys. This time, when he reached the troublesome transition, Scarlett hummed softly along, and somehow the melody found its way forward naturally. When he finished, the silence that followed was charged with possibilities. "That was beautiful," she whispered. "I've been working on it for months. I could never get it right until—" He trailed off, looking at her with something like wonder. Until tonight. Until you. He stood from the piano bench, and suddenly they were very close. Close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. Scarlett, I need to tell you something. What? The reason I don't socialize, the reason I live like this. It's not because I'm antisocial or eccentric. He took a shaky breath. 3 years ago, I was engaged to be married. Eleanor was perfect, beautiful, accomplished, from the right family. Everything I thought I wanted. Scarlett's heart clenched, but she remained silent, sensing he needed to tell this story. 2 weeks before our wedding, she came to see me. She said she'd realized she could never love someone like me. Someone who lived in shadows, who preferred books to parties, who wrote music instead of making conversation. She said I was too intense, too serious, too much. His voice grew quiet. She said living with me would be like being buried alive. Nathaniel. Every woman since then has confirmed what Eleanor said. I'm too much, too isolated, too set in my ways. So I stopped trying. He looked directly at her. But then you came here, and you listened to my music, and you make the conservatory bloom. And you're not afraid of the shadows in this house, or the shadows in me. Scarlett stepped closer, close enough to touch him if she dared. That's because Eleanor was an idiot. He blinked. What? She was an idiot, Scarlett repeated firmly. Anyone who thinks passion is too much, who thinks intensity is a flaw, who can't see that your music is pure magic, she's an idiot. And frankly, you're better off without her. Nathaniel stared at her, then started to laugh. A real, genuine laugh that transformed his entire face. Only you would call my ex-fiancée an idiot to my face. I call them like I see them. Scarlett grinned. Besides, she obviously didn't deserve you. And what makes you think you do? The question hung between them, loaded with meaning. Scarlett felt her heart race as she realized what he was really asking. I don't know if I do, she said honestly. But I'd like the chance to find out. Nathaniel reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was gentle, reverent, like she was something precious. Scarlett Montgomery, he said softly, you are the most extraordinary woman I've ever met. Even barefoot in your music room in the middle of the night? Especially then. They might have kissed then. Scarlett was almost certain they were about to, but the grandfather clock in the hall chose that moment to chime midnight, breaking the spell. Nathaniel stepped back, running a hand through his hair. You should get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be awkward if we pretend this didn't happen, Scarlett finished. So let's not pretend. He smiled, soft and genuine. No pretending. Good. She started toward the door, then turned back. Nathaniel, that piece you were playing, you should call it Midnight Revelations. Why? Because some truths can only be spoken in the dark. As Scarlett made her way back to her room, she could hear Nathaniel playing again. The same melody, but different now. Lighter, more hopeful. She fell asleep smiling, completely unaware that tomorrow would bring challenges that would test everything they'd discovered about each other tonight. But for now, in the magical space between midnight and dawn, anything seemed possible. Scarlett woke the next morning with a smile that could have powered the entire mansion. The memory of last night, Nathaniel's music, his confession, the almost kiss that still made her lips tingle, wrapped around her like the world's most perfect blanket. She practically floated through her morning routine, humming the melody from Midnight Revelations as she dressed. Even Mrs. Grimsby noticed her unusually cheerful demeanor at breakfast. You seem particularly energetic today, Miss Montgomery. It's a beautiful morning, Mrs. Grimsby. The sun is shining, the birds are singing, and I'm working in the most magnificent mansion with the most fascinating. Scarlett caught herself before she said something that would make the older woman's eyebrows permanently relocate to her hairline. Architecture I've ever seen. Mrs. Grimsby's expression suggested she wasn't fooled for a second, but before she could comment, the front doorbell rang. Both women froze. That's unusual, Mrs. Grimsby said slowly. We never have visitors. The bell rang again, more insistently this time, followed by an imperious knocking that somehow managed to sound expensive. I'll get it, Scarlett offered, but Mrs. Grimsby was already shaking her head. No, dear. Unknown visitors are my responsibility. You continue with your duties. But curiosity had always been Scarlett's weakness. After Mrs. Grimsby disappeared toward the front door, Scarlett crept to the hallway where she could hear voices, Mrs. Grimsby's carefully controlled tones and another voice that made Scarlett's blood run cold. Don't care what his current arrangements are. I'm here to see Nathaniel, and I'm not leaving until I do. The voice was cultured, confident, and carried the kind of authority that came with money and social position. It was also unmistakably feminine. Ma'am, as I explained, Mr. Ravencrest is not receiving visitors today. Mrs. Grimsby, isn't it? I remember you. Tell Nathaniel that Eleanor is here. He'll see me. Eleanor, as in Eleanor, the perfect ex-fiancée who broke Nathaniel's heart, Eleanor. Scarlett's good mood evaporated like morning mist in a hurricane. She peered around the corner and immediately understood why Nathaniel had fallen for this woman. Eleanor Ashford, because of course she had a name that sounded like royalty, was absolutely stunning. Tall, elegant, with platinum blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon and wearing a designer suit that probably cost more than Scarlett's yearly salary. She was everything Scarlett wasn't: polished, sophisticated, and clearly comfortable in a world of wealth and privilege. Very well, Mrs. Grimsby said with obvious reluctance. I'll inform the master of your arrival. Please wait in the main parlor. Scarlett scrambled back to the kitchen, her heart pounding. She tried to focus on polishing silver, but her hands were shaking too badly to hold anything valuable. What was Eleanor doing here? Why now, just when things between her and Nathaniel were becoming whatever they were becoming? 20 minutes later, she heard footsteps on the stairs, Nathaniel's footsteps, which she'd learned to recognize, followed by voices from the parlor. She knew she shouldn't eavesdrop. She also knew she was going to do it anyway. Eleanor? Nathaniel's voice was carefully neutral. This is unexpected. Darling, you look wonderful. A little pale, perhaps, but that's always suited you. Eleanor's laugh was like crystal wind chimes, beautiful and completely artificial. I hope you don't mind me dropping by unannounced, but I was in the area and simply had to see you. You were in the area? Eleanor, the nearest major city is 2 hours away. Well, perhaps I made a special trip. Can't a woman visit an old friend? There was a pause, and Scarlett found herself holding her breath. We're not friends, Eleanor. You made that quite clear 3 years ago. Oh, Nathaniel, must you be so dramatic? That was all just pre-wedding nerves. You know how emotional women get before their big day. Scarlett's jaw dropped. The audacity of this woman was breathtaking. Pre-wedding nerves? Nathaniel's voice was dangerously quiet. You told me I was like living death. You said being married to me would be like being buried alive. I was being theatrical. You always did bring out my dramatic side. Eleanor's voice moved closer, as if she was approaching him. Darling, I've had time to think, and I realize I made a terrible mistake. We were perfect together. Everyone said so. Everyone except you. I was young and foolish, but I'm older now, wiser. I've realized that what we had was special, rare. Her voice dropped to what was probably meant to be a seductive purr. I want us to try again, Nathaniel. I want to come home. Scarlett felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not when she and Nathaniel had just found each other. This isn't your home anymore, Eleanor. It could be. We could be happy here, just like we planned. I know you still love me. You wouldn't have kept all those portraits of my family in the gallery if you didn't. Wait, what? Scarlett's eyes widened. The portraits in the gallery weren't Ravencrest ancestors. They were Eleanor's family. But that meant, those portraits have been there for decades, Eleanor. They came with the house. Oh. Eleanor's voice faltered for just a moment before recovering. Well, that's not the point. The point is that we belong together. I know you've been lonely here, darling. This huge house all by yourself? It must be terribly isolating. I'm not alone. What do you mean? I have staff, Mrs. Grimsby, and others. Scarlett's heart sank. Others. Like she was just another piece of furniture. Staff isn't the same as family, Nathaniel. I'm talking about real companionship, love, the life we were meant to have together. There was another long pause, and Scarlett found herself gripping the doorframe so tightly her knuckles were white. Eleanor, what we had is over. It ended 3 years ago when you decided I wasn't worth the effort. But I'm here now. I'm telling you I was wrong. Yes, you were wrong, but not about leaving. You were wrong about why you left. You didn't leave because I was too intense or too serious. You left because you realized you never actually loved me. You loved the idea of me, the wealthy husband, the beautiful home, the social status. But you never loved me. That's not true. Isn't it? Tell me, Eleanor, what's my favorite book? What do I do when I can't sleep? What's the name of the piece I was working on when we were engaged? Silence. You don't know, do you? Because you never paid attention to who I actually was. That's not fair. You never talked about those things. I did. You just weren't listening. Scarlett heard movement, footsteps crossing the room. I think you should leave, Eleanor. Nathaniel, please don't let pride ruin what we could have. I know you've been living like a hermit, shutting yourself away from the world. Is that really what you want? To grow old alone in this mausoleum? What I want, Nathaniel said quietly, is someone who sees me, really sees me, and doesn't find me lacking. Someone who listens to my music and understands what it means. Someone who makes this house feel like a home instead of a museum. Scarlett's heart stuttered. Was he talking about her? I can do that. I can learn to... No, Eleanor. You can't learn to love someone you've already decided isn't worth loving. Please go. This isn't over, Nathaniel. You'll realize you're making a mistake. Scarlett heard the sharp click of heels across marble, then the slam of the front door. She remained frozen in place, her mind reeling, until she heard Nathaniel's voice right behind her. You can come out now, Scarlett. I know you were listening. She turned slowly, expecting anger, but finding only exhaustion in his dark eyes. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Yes, you did. And I'm glad you did. He stepped closer, his expression serious. Did you hear what I said? About wanting someone who sees me? Scarlett nodded, not trusting her voice. I was talking about you. And then, finally, wonderfully, he kissed her. The kiss lasted exactly 17 seconds. Scarlett counted because apparently her brain had decided to catalog this moment for posterity. And when they broke apart, both of them were breathing like they'd just run a marathon. Well, Scarlett said softly, her hands still fisted in Nathaniel's shirt. That was worth waiting for. Nathaniel's answering smile was pure sunshine breaking through storm clouds. I've been wanting to do that since the day you told me Eleanor was an idiot. Only since then, I'm disappointed. I was hoping to make a better first impression. He laughed, the sound rich and warm, and Scarlett realized she would do absolutely anything to hear that laugh every day for the rest of her life, which was a terrifying thought, but also wonderfully perfect. Scarlett, I need you to know, if you're about to apologize for kissing me, I might have to fire myself just so I can throw something at you without it being unprofessional. I was going to say that I've never felt like this before, not even with Eleanor. What I felt for her was comfortable, expected. This is terrifying and amazing and completely insane? Exactly. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. Are you sure about this? About us? Because once we cross this line, there's no going back to being just employer and employee. Scarlett pretended to consider this seriously. Well, I suppose I could learn to live with having the most handsome, talented, mysterious boss in the world as my boyfriend, instead of just my employer. If I really have to. Boyfriend? His eyebrows rose. That seems rather pedestrian for someone who lives in a Gothic mansion. Fine. Brooding romantic hero with excellent piano skills and questionable decorating choices. Better. They were about to kiss again when Mrs. Grimsby's voice echoed from the front hall. Mr. Ravencrest, there's a gentleman here to see you. He says it's urgent legal business. Nathaniel groaned. What is it with today and unexpected visitors? He called back, I'll be right there, Mrs. Grimsby. Legal business doesn't sound good, Scarlett said, straightening his tie. When had she messed up his tie? It's probably nothing. Maybe something about the estate taxes. But his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. They made their way to the front hall, where a thin, nervous-looking man in an expensive suit was clutching a briefcase like it contained the crown jewels. Mr. Ravencrest, I'm Charles Pemberton from Pemberton, Wainwright and Associates. I represent Miss Eleanor Ashford. Scarlett felt her stomach drop to somewhere around her ankles. What does Eleanor want now, Mr. Pemberton? The lawyer cleared his throat uncomfortably. May I suggest we discuss this privately? This is a rather delicate matter. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Miss Montgomery. Pemberton glanced at Scarlett uncertainly, then back at Nathaniel. Very well. Miss Ashford has asked me to remind you of certain contractual obligations that remain unfulfilled from your previous engagement. Contractual obligations? Nathaniel's voice was dangerously quiet. Yes, sir. The prenuptial agreement that was signed included specific clauses regarding compensation in the event of dissolution of the engagement. Miss Ashford is prepared to waive these claims in exchange for reconciliation. Scarlett didn't understand all the legal jargon, but she understood enough. Eleanor was trying to blackmail Nathaniel into taking her back. Let me see this contract, Nathaniel said coldly. Pemberton opened his briefcase and handed over a thick document. Nathaniel read through it quickly, his expression growing darker with each page. This is ridiculous. These clauses were never meant to be enforced. They were Eleanor's father's idea, not mine. Nevertheless, sir, they are legally binding. Miss Ashford invested considerable time and resources in planning your wedding, made social commitments based on your engagement, and suffered significant embarrassment when the engagement ended. When she ended it, Nathaniel corrected sharply. She's the one who walked away. The contract makes no distinction about who initiated the termination, sir. Scarlett felt anger bubbling up in her chest. How much is she asking for? Pemberton looked uncomfortable. $2 million. $2 million? Scarlett started to explode, but Nathaniel caught her hand. Or? He asked calmly. I beg your pardon? Eleanor always has an or. What does she really want? Pemberton shifted nervously. She would be willing to consider the matter settled if you were to resume your previous relationship. Marriage within 6 months would nullify all financial obligations. The silence that followed was so thick, you could have cut it with a sword. Get out, Nathaniel said quietly. Sir, I understand this is a shock. Get out of my house now. Mr. Ravencrest, I strongly advise you to consider. I said get out. Nathaniel's voice echoed through the mansion like thunder. Pemberton practically ran for the door, clutching his briefcase. After the lawyer left, Nathaniel stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the contract in his hands. She can't be serious, Scarlett said finally. Oh, she's serious. Eleanor always was vindictive when she didn't get her way. He looked up at Scarlett, and she saw something that terrified her. Defeat. I'm sorry, Scarlett. I should have told you about this. Told me about what? That your ex-fiancé is a psychotic gold digger? I kind of figured that out myself. About the contract. About the complications this could cause. He ran a hand through his hair. $2 million, Scarlett. That's not pocket change even for me. So we fight it, we get lawyers, With what? Eleanor's family has more money than God and a legal team that could make the Supreme Court nervous. Even if I win eventually, the legal fees alone could bankrupt me. Scarlett stared at him, realization dawning. You're not seriously considering taking her back? Of course not, but Scarlett, if I lose this case, I could lose everything. The mansion, the estate, my entire fortune. I could end up with nothing to offer you except debt and legal problems. And you think I care about that? You should care. You deserve better than— Stop. Scarlett stepped closer, taking the contract from his hands and setting it aside. Just stop. Do you really think I fell for your bank account? Your mansion? Your fancy piano? Didn't you? The question hit her like a slap. Is that really what you think of me? No, that's not. Scarlett, I know you're not like that. But this changes everything. If Eleanor wins this case, you'll be stuck with a man who can't even afford to keep you in the lifestyle you deserve. Scarlett looked at him for a long moment, then started to laugh. What's so funny? You think I deserve some grand lifestyle? Nathaniel, 3 weeks ago I was sleeping on a couch in a rat-infested apartment, eating ramen for every meal, and listening to my father destroy himself with alcohol. This mansion, this job, it's all more than I ever dreamed of having. She cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. I don't love your money, you ridiculous man. I love that you play piano at midnight when you can't sleep. I love that you rescue dying plants and treat your staff like family. I love that you see beauty in shadows and find magic in music. Eleanor can take every penny you have. I'll still choose you. Nathaniel stared at her, and she saw the exact moment when hope rekindled in his eyes. Even if we end up in a tiny apartment eating ramen? Especially then. Although I should warn you, I make terrible ramen. He kissed her then, fierce and desperate and full of promises. When they broke apart, Scarlett saw something new in his expression: determination. Eleanor wants a fight? She'll get one. But she's not getting you, and she's not getting me. So what do we do? Nathaniel smiled, and it was sharp as a blade. We find out exactly what Eleanor's been up to for the past 3 years. Because I guarantee you, she's not as innocent as she pretends to be. I like the way you think, Mr. Ravencrest. Good, Miss Montgomery. Because things are about to get very interesting around here. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance as if the very sky was preparing for the battle ahead. 2 days after the lawyer's visit, Nathaniel's study looked like a detective's war room. Papers covered every surface. Eleanor's photograph was pinned to a makeshift board like she was a wanted criminal, and Scarlett was sprawled on the Persian rug with a laptop, surrounded by printouts and coffee cups. Okay, this is interesting, she said, squinting at the screen. Eleanor's been engaged 4 times in the past 3 years. 4 times? Nathaniel looked up from the legal documents he'd been reviewing. To whom? Let's see. Marcus Thornfield, oil money, lasted 6 months. James Worthington, tech fortune, 8 months. Harrison Blackwood, real estate empire, 4 months. Scarlett scrolled down. And most recently, Victor Pemberton. Pemberton? As in Charles Pemberton, the lawyer who came here threatening you. Yes. Scarlett grinned triumphantly. Plot twist. Her current fiancé is the same lawyer trying to extort money from her ex-fiancé. That can't be legal. Nathaniel crossed the room and knelt beside her, reading over her shoulder. This is perfect. Conflict of interest, professional misconduct. He paused, distracted by how good she smelled, like vanilla and determination. Scarlett, you're brilliant. I know, but wait, there's more. She clicked on another tab. Look at this Society page article from last month. The headline read, Pemberton-Ashford engagement announced, with a photo of Eleanor and a thin, nervous-looking man, who was definitely the same lawyer who'd visited them. Miss Ashford, recently returned from an extended European tour, announced her engagement to prominent attorney Charles Pemberton. Nathaniel read aloud. The couple plans to wed this winter in what promises to be the social event of the season. European tour, my foot, Scarlett snorted. Look at the dates. She was engaged to Harrison Blackwood until 3 months ago. Then suddenly she's back from Europe and engaged to a lawyer. A lawyer who just happens to specialize in contract disputes and prenuptial agreements. Nathaniel's eyes were gleaming with the light of battle. This isn't about wanting me back. This is about funding her wedding to another man. Gets better. I called my friend Ruby. She works at the Millbrook Country Club. And guess what Eleanor's been telling people? I'm afraid to ask. That you've been begging her to come back. Sending her flowers and love letters, basically stalking her with romantic gestures. Scarlett's expression was murderous. She's painting herself as the poor pursued woman who's bravely resisting your desperate attempts to win her back. That's insane. I haven't contacted her once since she left. I know that. You know that. But the rest of high society thinks you're some kind of obsessed ex who can't let go. It's the perfect setup for her story. Either you pay up to leave her alone, or you take her back and she gets her pick of wealthy husbands while maintaining her reputation. Nathaniel stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. Brilliant and completely evil. No wonder she looked so confident when she was here. There's one more thing, Scarlett said quietly. Ruby told me something else. Eleanor's been asking questions about you, specifically about your staff, about whether you've been lonely. She knows about us. She suspects. Ruby said Eleanor seemed particularly interested in whether you'd hired any young, attractive female employees recently. The implications hit them both at the same time. She's not just after money, Nathaniel said slowly. She's trying to eliminate competition by making it financially impossible for you to be with anyone else. If you're fighting a lawsuit, you can't exactly focus on a new relationship. And if you lose everything, no one would want to be with a man who can't provide for them. Nathaniel's voice was bitter. Except she doesn't know you. No, she doesn't, and that's going to be her downfall. Scarlett closed the laptop and stood up, brushing dust off her jeans. Because while she's been playing chess thinking she's got us in checkmate, she's forgotten one crucial thing. What's that? I'm not a rich society princess who's only interested in your bank account. I'm a girl who grew up scrapping and fighting for everything I had. And when someone threatens my family, she looked at him meaningfully. I fight dirty. Nathaniel felt something warm and fierce expand in his chest. What do you have in mind? Well, first we're going to expose the conflict of interest between Eleanor and her lawyer boyfriend. Then we're going to dig deeper into those other broken engagements. I'm betting there's a pattern of financial settlements there too. And then? Scarlett's smile was absolutely wicked. Then we're going to give Eleanor exactly what she wants, a wedding, just not the one she's expecting. Before Nathaniel could ask what she meant, the sound of an engine in the driveway caught their attention. They looked out the window to see a familiar black sedan pulling up to the front door. Eleanor again? Nathaniel asked grimly. Worse. Scarlett squinted at the figure getting out of the car. That's Charles Pemberton, and he looks agitated. They watched as the lawyer hurried up the front steps, briefcase in hand. A moment later, Mrs. Grimsby knocked on the study door. Mr. Ravencrest? Mr. Pemberton is here again. He insists it's urgent. Nathaniel and Scarlett exchanged glances. Send him in, Mrs. Grimsby, and would you mind staying nearby? I have a feeling we might need a witness. Pemberton entered looking considerably less composed than he had 2 days ago. His suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and there was a desperate edge to his expression. Mr. Ravencrest, thank you for seeing me. I need to speak with you privately. As I said before, anything you have to say can be said in front of Miss Montgomery. Sir, please, this is about Miss Ashford, and I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. What kind of misunderstanding? Scarlett asked sweetly. Pemberton's eyes darted between them nervously. She may not have been entirely forthcoming about certain aspects of her claim against Mr. Ravencrest. You mean she lied? Nathaniel's voice was dangerously calm. Not lied exactly, but perhaps embellished certain details. Pemberton was sweating now. The truth is, she's been pressuring me to pursue this case, even though I advised her the contract might not hold up in court. And why would she do that? Because, Pemberton swallowed hard, because she needs the money. Our wedding is costing significantly more than originally planned, and her family has cut her off. Cut her off? After the 4th broken engagement, her father refused to fund any more wedding expenses. He told her if she wanted to get married again, she'd have to pay for it herself. Scarlett bit her lip to keep from laughing. So she decided to shake down her ex-fiancé instead. I never meant for it to go this far, Pemberton said miserably. But Eleanor can be very persuasive. She convinced me that you owed her something for the humiliation she suffered when the engagement ended. The humiliation she suffered? Nathaniel's eyebrows rose. She's the one who ended it. Yes, well, she may have adjusted that detail slightly. Mr. Pemberton, Scarlett said gently, are you here because you've grown a conscience or because you've realized you're about to marry a woman who manipulates people for money? Pemberton's shoulders sagged. Both, I think. Miss Montgomery, Mr. Ravencrest, I'm withdrawing from this case. The contract claims are baseless, and I can't continue to represent Eleanor in something I know is frivolous. And Eleanor? How is she taking this news? She doesn't know yet. I came here first because I wanted to apologize before she realizes what's happening and tries to find another lawyer. Mr. Pemberton, Nathaniel said formally, I accept your apology, and I think you're making the right choice. After the lawyer left, Scarlett turned to Nathaniel with a huge grin. Well, that was easier than expected. Too easy, Nathaniel said thoughtfully. Eleanor won't give up this easily. She'll find another way. Let her try. We know her game now, and we have allies. Scarlett stood on her tiptoes and kissed him softly. Besides, I told you I fight dirty. Eleanor has no idea what she's up against. What are you planning? Nothing illegal, just creative. Her smile was pure mischief. Trust me? With my life. Good. Because tomorrow, we're going to make sure Eleanor Ashford never bothers us again. As if summoned by their conversation, thunder rolled across the sky, and the first drops of rain began pattering against the windows. But inside the mansion, for the first time in days, everything felt bright and full of possibility. The storm was coming, but they would weather it together. You want to do what? Nathaniel stared at Scarlett as if she'd suggested they burn down the mansion and join the circus. Invite Eleanor to our engagement party, Scarlett repeated calmly, adjusting the beautiful sapphire ring that had appeared on her finger that morning, along with Nathaniel's nervous proposal over breakfast. Trust me, it's brilliant. They were in the conservatory surrounded by the flourishing plants that had become Scarlett's pride and joy. Sunlight streamed through the glass ceiling, making everything look magical, which was appropriate since Scarlett felt like she was living in a fairy tale that she was determined to write the ending for. Scarlett, darling, I love your devious mind, but Eleanor will never come to celebrate our engagement. She'll probably throw the invitation in the fire. Not if she thinks she can ruin it. Scarlett's smile was pure mischief. Ruby told me Eleanor's been telling everyone that you're only marrying me to make her jealous. She thinks if she shows up and creates a scene, you'll realize your mistake and come running back to her. That's insane. That's Eleanor. But here's the beautiful part. She's wrong about everything, about you, about me, about what's going to happen when she shows up. Mrs. Grimsby appeared in the conservatory doorway, holding a silver tray with elegant invitation cards. The invitations are ready, Miss Montgomery. Shall I have them delivered? Yes, please, especially the one for Eleanor Ashford. Make sure it's hand-delivered. After Mrs. Grimsby left, Nathaniel pulled Scarlett into his arms. I still think you're crazy, but I'm absolutely mad about you, so I suppose it evens out. You won't think I'm crazy when you see what happens next. What exactly is going to happen next? Scarlett stood on her tiptoes and kissed him softly. Justice. With a side of poetic irony. The engagement party was everything a Gothic romance heroine could dream of. The mansion blazed with lights. The gardens were strung with fairy lights that turned the grounds into something from a dream, and guests in elegant attire wandered through rooms that sparkled like jewels. Scarlett had chosen a midnight blue dress that made her eyes look like emeralds and her skin glow like moonlight. Nathaniel, in his perfectly tailored black tuxedo, looked like he'd stepped out of a romantic novel, which, Scarlett reflected, he essentially had. She's here, Mrs. Grimsby murmured, appearing at Scarlett's elbow as they stood greeting guests in the main hall. Eleanor swept through the front door like a force of nature, dressed in a white gown that was clearly meant to upstage the bride-to-be. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, and her smile sharp enough to cut glass. Nathaniel, she called out, her voice carrying across the room. Darling, I simply had to come and meet the little housekeeper who thinks she can take my place. The entire room went quiet. Scarlett felt Nathaniel tense beside her, but she squeezed his hand reassuringly. Eleanor, Scarlett said warmly, stepping forward with a brilliant smile. How wonderful that you could make it. I was so hoping you'd be here tonight. Eleanor's confident expression faltered slightly. This clearly wasn't the reaction she'd expected. Well, I couldn't miss seeing Nathaniel's latest phase. Though I have to say, this whole engagement charade is rather beneath you, darling. Charade? Scarlett tilted her head innocently. What do you mean? Oh, please, we all know you're just using him for his money. How much is he paying you to play the devoted fiancé? The guests gasped, but Scarlett just laughed, a sound like silver bells. Eleanor, sweetie, I think you have me confused with someone else. I'm not being paid anything. Don't lie to me, you little gold digger. Because, Scarlett continued smoothly, I'm the one with the money. Eleanor's face went blank. What? Nathaniel stepped forward, his arm sliding around Scarlett's waist. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet my fiancée, Scarlett Montgomery, heir to the Montgomery shipping fortune. The room erupted in surprised murmurs. Eleanor's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror. That's impossible, she whispered. Actually, it's quite possible, said a distinguished older gentleman who'd been standing near the champagne table. He approached with a warm smile. Hello, darling daughter. Daddy? Scarlett threw her arms around the silver-haired man who'd been posing as a guest all evening. Everyone, I'd like you to meet my father, Thomas Montgomery. But your father, Eleanor started, is a recovered alcoholic who's been sober for 6 months and working to rebuild our relationship, Scarlett said firmly. People can change, Eleanor. Some of us choose to. Thomas Montgomery beamed at his daughter. When Scarlett told me about this young man and how happy he makes her, I knew I had to meet him. And when she explained the situation with Miss Ashford here, well, he turned to Eleanor with a look that could freeze champagne. I've dealt with fortune hunters before, young lady. They're not nearly as clever as they think they are. This is ridiculous. Eleanor's composure was cracking. Nathaniel, you can't seriously be choosing this. This nobody over me. I'm choosing the woman I love, Nathaniel said simply. The woman who sees who I really am and loves me anyway. The woman who makes me want to be better every day. But I came back for you. I was willing to give you another chance. Eleanor, Scarlett said gently, he doesn't need another chance. He's not the one who made mistakes. Eleanor looked around the room at the faces watching her, some pitying, some disgusted, all witnessing her complete humiliation. For a moment, Scarlett almost felt sorry for her. This isn't over, Eleanor hissed. Actually, it is, said a familiar voice from the doorway. Charles Pemberton entered, but he wasn't alone. A stern-looking woman in a police uniform accompanied him. Charles? Eleanor's voice was small. What are you doing here? I'm here to tell you that our engagement is over, Eleanor, and to turn over evidence of your fraudulent contract claims to the authorities. You can't. Actually, I can. Officer Martinez, this is Eleanor Ashford. She's been running a systematic con game on wealthy men for 3 years, using fraudulent contracts and emotional manipulation to extort money. As Officer Martinez approached Eleanor with handcuffs, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. Scarlett watched with satisfaction as karma finally caught up with the woman who'd tried to destroy her happiness. This is for Harrison Blackwood, Marcus Thornfield, and James Worthington, Officer Martinez said as she cuffed Eleanor. They all pressed charges once they realized they weren't the only ones. As Eleanor was led away, still protesting her innocence, the party resumed with considerably more energy. Everyone loves a good dramatic conclusion, and this one had everything. Love triumphant, justice served, and a villain getting her comeuppance. Later, when the last guest had left and they were alone in the conservatory under the stars, Nathaniel pulled Scarlett close. So, he said, nuzzling her neck, when exactly were you planning to tell me you're an heiress? I'm not really. Daddy's company is successful, but most of the money goes to charity and helping other families dealing with addiction. I meant what I said. I'd choose you even if you were broke. And your father? The recovery? Real. He started getting help the day I left. Said losing me was his wake-up call. She smiled softly. He wanted to meet the man who made his daughter happy enough to take a chance on love. I love you, Scarlett Montgomery. All of you. The parts that are strong and the parts that are scared, the parts that are fierce and the parts that are gentle. I love you too, Nathaniel Ravencrest. Even your dramatic tendencies and your gothic mansion and your midnight piano concerts. Speaking of which, he led her to the piano in the corner of the conservatory. I finished our song. As his fingers found the keys, the melody that had brought them together filled the air. Midnight Revelations. Now complete and perfect. Scarlett hummed along, and their voices blended in harmony that spoke of love found, battles won, and a future bright with promise. 6 months later, the wedding was everything Eleanor's would have been, and nothing like it at all. Instead of a stuffy society affair, Scarlett and Nathaniel chose to marry in the conservatory, surrounded by blooming flowers and warm sunlight. Mrs. Grimsby wept happy tears. Thomas Montgomery walked his daughter down the aisle with pride, and even the usually stoic butler was seen dabbing his eyes during the ceremony. Do you, Scarlett, take this dramatically brooding, piano-playing, mansion-dwelling man to be your husband? The minister asked with a smile. I do. Someone has to keep him from turning into a complete Gothic cliché. And do you, Nathaniel, take this stubborn, brilliant, plant-rescuing woman to be your wife? I do. Someone has to make sure she doesn't reorganize the entire world before breakfast. Their kiss was met with applause, laughter, and the gentle sound of rain beginning to fall on the conservatory roof. Because some things never change, and Ravencrest Mansion always did have perfect timing for dramatic weather. As they danced their first dance to Midnight Revelations, now played by a full orchestra, Scarlett looked up at her new husband. Any regrets, Mr. Ravencrest? Only one, Mrs. Ravencrest. What's that? That it took 47 other housekeepers before I found you. Well, Scarlett said, spinning in his arms as rain drummed softly above them, and their future stretched out bright and endless. I was worth the wait. And in the conservatory of Ravencrest Mansion, surrounded by love and laughter and the promise of countless midnight revelations to come, they lived happily ever after. The end.